Hello there and welcome. Tonight, we're leaving the present behind and taking a slow journey into the darker corners of history. These are true stories of tragedy, violence, mystery, persecution, and lives caught in some of history's most unsettling moments. So wherever you are, get comfortable. Let the noise of the day fade away. Dim the lights and allow your mind to drift into the past. Tonight, we're exploring 20 dark stories from history to fall asleep to. And now, our journey begins. Our next story takes us to the city of Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. At first, it seemed like an ordinary day. Merchants opened their shops, workers went about their business, and life continued as it always had. Then something strange happened. According to historical accounts, a woman stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, no obvious reason at all. Yet she continued dancing for hours, then for days. Soon, other people began to join her. What started with a single dancer grew into dozens, then hundreds. Before long, large groups of people were dancing throughout the city. Many appeared unable to stop. Witnesses reported that some dancers continued for days, despite exhaustion, dehydration, and injury. The situation became so alarming that local authorities searched desperately for an explanation. Physicians, religious leaders, and city officials all offered different theories. Some believed it was caused by illness. Others thought it might be divine punishment. No one truly knew. Eventually, the outbreak faded away as mysteriously as it had begun. More than 500 years later, historians still debate what really happened in Strasbourg during that strange summer. Whatever the answer may be, the dancing plague remains one of history's most unusual and enduring mysteries. Our next story begins in medieval France. Jacques de Molay was the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, one of the most powerful organizations in Europe. For years, the Templars had accumulated wealth, land, and influence. But in 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of Templar members across the kingdom. They were accused of crimes ranging from heresy to corruption. After years of imprisonment and trials, Jacques de Molay was sentenced to death. In 1314, he was brought before a crowd and condemned to be burned at the stake. According to legend, as the flames rose around him, de Molay declared that both King Philip and Pope Clement V would soon answer before God's judgment. What happened next helped create one of history's most famous curses. Within a year, both the Pope and the King were dead. Whether it was coincidence or something more, people across Europe began whispering about the dying Templars' final words. More than 700 years later, the curse of Jacques de Molay remains one of history's most enduring legends. Our next story takes us to 19th century China. A young man named Xiuquan spent years studying for the imperial examinations, hoping to earn a government position. But after repeatedly failing the difficult tests, he suffered a severe emotional breakdown. During this period, Hong experienced a series of vivid visions. At first, he didn't fully understand them. Years later, after reading Christian religious texts, he came to a remarkable conclusion. Hong became convinced that he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ. Most people might have kept such a belief to themselves. Hong did not. Instead, he began preaching his message across China. To the surprise of many, thousands of people listened, then tens of thousands. Eventually, his movement grew into a massive rebellion known as the Taiping Rebellion. For more than a decade, armies fought across China in one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Millions of people lost their lives. Today, Hong Xiuquan remains one of history's most unusual and influential figures, a man whose extraordinary belief helped change the course of a nation. Our next story takes us to Washington, D.C., during the final days of the American Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln had carried the weight of the nation through 4 difficult years of conflict. But only days before his assassination, he shared a dream that many would later find unsettling. According to those close to him, Lincoln dreamed he was walking through the White House. The halls were strangely quiet. Then he heard the sound of people crying. Following the voices, he entered a room where soldiers stood silently beside a covered body. Lincoln asked who had died. One of the guards answered, "The president." He awoke deeply disturbed by the dream. Only a short time later, on April 14, 1865, Lincoln was assassinated while attending a play at Ford's Theatre. Whether the dream was simply coincidence, a reflection of the enormous pressures he faced, or something more mysterious has been debated ever since. Today, it remains one of history's most famous and haunting premonitions. Our next story takes us to the early years of the United States. Long before becoming the nation's 7th president, Andrew Jackson had earned a reputation for defending his honor. During his lifetime, he participated in numerous duels, a practice that was still accepted among many gentlemen of the time. One of the most famous took place in 1806. Jackson faced a skilled marksman named Charles Dickinson after a bitter personal dispute. When the duel began, Dickinson fired first. The bullet struck Jackson in the chest. Remarkably, he remained standing. Ignoring his injury, Jackson calmly raised his pistol, took careful aim, and returned fire. His shot proved fatal. The bullet that struck Jackson was never removed. It remained lodged near his heart for the rest of his life. Years later, despite carrying the wound, Andrew Jackson would become President of the United States. His remarkable resilience helped shape the image of one of America's most determined and controversial leaders. Our next story takes us to Paris at the end of the 19th century. Scientist Marie Curie spent years studying mysterious materials that emitted an invisible form of energy. Working alongside her husband, Pierre, she discovered 2 new elements: polonium and radium. At the time, no one fully understood the dangers of radiation. Marie handled radioactive materials with her bare hands and often carried small, glowing samples in her pockets because she found their soft blue light beautiful. Her discoveries transformed science and eventually earned her 2 Nobel Prizes. But they also came at a terrible cost. Years of exposure to radiation damaged her health, and in 1934, Marie Curie died from a disease linked to that exposure. Even today, more than a century later, many of her notebooks, laboratory journals, and pieces of equipment remain so radioactive that they are stored inside lead-lined containers. Researchers who wish to examine them must wear protective clothing. Even Marie Curie's coffin is lined with lead to safely contain the radiation that still lingers. It is a remarkable reminder that one woman's discoveries forever change science, and that their invisible power can still be measured more than 100 years later. Our next story takes us to Rome in the year 897. It begins with one of the strangest trials in history. Pope Stephen VI ordered the body of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, to be dug up months after his death. The corpse was dressed once again in papal robes and placed on a throne inside a church. An official was appointed to answer questions on behalf of the dead pope as the trial began. Formosus was accused of unlawfully becoming pope and violating church law. The outcome was never really in doubt. He was declared guilty. His papal robes were removed. 3 fingers used for blessings were cut from his hand, and his body was eventually thrown into the Tiber River. The bizarre spectacle shocked many people in Rome. Public anger quickly turned against Pope Stephen VI. Before long, he was removed from power, imprisoned, and later died in captivity. Today, the Cadaver Synod, as it became known, remains one of the most extraordinary and unsettling episodes in the history of the medieval papacy, a reminder that truth can sometimes be stranger than fiction. Our next story takes us to the Kingdom of Hungary during the late 16th century. Imagine arriving at a magnificent castle surrounded by forests and rolling hills. Its halls are filled with servants, noble guests, and flickering candlelight. From the outside, it appears to be the home of one of Europe's most powerful families. But according to legend, something far darker was hidden behind its stone walls. The castle belonged to Elizabeth Báthory, a Hungarian countess whose name would become one of the most infamous in history. Stories began spreading that young servant girls who entered the castle were never seen again. The most famous legend claimed that Elizabeth believed bathing in the blood of young women could preserve her youth and beauty. Whether that tale was true remains heavily debated by historians. What is well documented is that in 1610, investigators searched her castle after years of accusations and reports of missing girls. Witness testimony described horrific abuse, although historians continue to debate how much of the evidence was exaggerated by political rivals. Because Elizabeth was a member of the nobility, she was never publicly executed. Instead, she was confined inside her own castle. Workers sealed the doorway to her chamber with stone, leaving only a small opening through which food and water could be passed. There, she remained for nearly 4 years until her death in 1614. Whether Elizabeth Báthory was history's most prolific serial killer or the victim of political conspiracy may never be fully known. But her story has haunted Europe for more than 4 centuries, reminding us that the line between history and legend is sometimes surprisingly difficult to see. Our next story takes us to the year 1816, when people across Europe and North America began noticing something was terribly wrong with the weather. Imagine waking on a June morning, expecting the warmth of summer. Instead, frost covers the fields. Snow falls from the sky, and the air feels more like the middle of winter than the beginning of June. For farmers, it was a nightmare. Crops struggled to grow, harvests failed, and food became increasingly scarce. Many families were forced to leave their homes in search of better farmland, while others faced rising food prices and widespread hunger. People had no idea what had caused such a dramatic change. Some believed it was a punishment from God. Others feared the climate itself had permanently changed. The true cause, however, was taking place thousands of miles away. Just 1 year earlier, in April of 1815, Mount Tambora, a volcano in what is now Indonesia, erupted with extraordinary force. The explosion was one of the largest volcanic eruptions ever recorded. It blasted enormous amounts of ash and sulfur high into Earth's atmosphere, where they spread around the globe. The particles reflected sunlight back into space, cooling the planet and disrupting weather patterns for many months. The result became known as the Year Without a Summer. Even today, it remains one of history's most remarkable reminders that a single event in one corner of the world can quietly change life across the entire planet. Our next story takes us to the city of Dublin, Ireland in the year 1875. Imagine walking through the busy streets on an ordinary summer afternoon. Horse-drawn wagons rattle over the cobblestones. Shopkeepers greet their customers. Children play in the narrow streets. Then, without warning, smoke begins rising into the sky. A fire has broken out inside one of the city's whiskey warehouses. At first, many people assume it will simply burn itself out. But as the flames spread, they reach thousands of wooden barrels filled with whiskey. The intense heat causes the barrels to burst one after another. Soon, rivers of burning whiskey begin flowing through the streets. Flames race along the gutters, setting nearby buildings alight as frightened residents rush to escape. Firefighters worked tirelessly to contain the blaze, while crowds gathered to watch the extraordinary scene unfold. Remarkably, despite the enormous fire, very few people died from the flames themselves. Instead, most of the victims were overcome after drinking large quantities of the whiskey flowing through the streets. In total, 13 people lost their lives from alcohol poisoning. The event became known as the Dublin Whiskey Fire. Even today, it remains one of history's strangest urban disasters. A reminder that sometimes the greatest danger isn't always the fire itself, but the unexpected choices people make in the middle of it. Our next story takes us to the Korean Demilitarized Zone, better known as the DMZ, in the summer of 1976. Imagine standing at one of the most heavily guarded borders in the world. On one side are United Nations soldiers. On the other are North Korean guards. Between them lies a narrow strip of land where even the smallest misunderstanding can become dangerously serious. Nearby stands a large poplar tree. At first glance, it seems completely ordinary, but its thick branches have grown so wide that they block the view between two United Nations checkpoints. To solve the problem, a small work party is sent to trim the tree. Armed with ladders, ropes, and axes, the men begin cutting away the overgrown branches. Moments later, North Korean soldiers approach. They insist the tree should not be touched. An argument begins. Within minutes, the confrontation turns violent. Two United States Army officers, Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, are killed during the attack. The incident shocks the world. For several tense days, many fear the violence could grow into another war on the Korean peninsula. Instead of backing down, the United States and South Korea prepare an extraordinary response. The operation is given an unusual name, Operation Paul Bunyan. A few days later, engineers return to the same tree. This time, they are protected by hundreds of soldiers, tanks, attack helicopters, fighter aircraft, and even American B-52 bombers circling overhead. It becomes one of the largest military shows of force ever assembled for the simple task of cutting down a single tree. The chainsaws begin their work. Within minutes, the poplar tree is reduced to a stump. Remarkably, despite the enormous military buildup, not another shot is fired. The operation ends peacefully, and both sides gradually step back from the brink of a much larger conflict. Today, the poplar tree incident remains one of the Cold War's most extraordinary moments. A reminder that, in places where tensions run high, even the simple act of trimming a tree can bring the world frighteningly close to war. Our next story takes us to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the evening of October 14th, 1912. Imagine standing outside a crowded auditorium as people gather to hear one of America's most famous politicians speak. Campaign banners flutter in the cool autumn air. Supporters eagerly wait for his arrival. Then, just as Theodore Roosevelt steps from his car, a man pushes through the crowd. A gunshot echoes down the street. The bullet strikes Roosevelt in the chest. Panic spreads through the crowd. Many assume the former president has been mortally wounded. But Roosevelt doesn't fall. Instead, he calmly places his hand inside his coat and discovers that the bullet has first passed through two unexpected obstacles: a folded 50-page speech and a thick steel eyeglass case. Together, they had slowed the bullet just enough to keep it from reaching his lungs. After briefly coughing to make sure he wasn't bleeding internally, Roosevelt made an extraordinary decision. Rather than going straight to the hospital, he insisted on delivering the speech he had spent weeks preparing. Standing before the audience, he began with words that would soon become famous. It takes more than that to kill a bull moose. For nearly 90 minutes, he continued speaking, despite the bullet still being lodged inside his chest. Only after finishing his address did he allow doctors to examine his wound. Because removing the bullet posed greater risks than leaving it in place, physicians decided not to operate. Remarkably, Roosevelt carried the bullet with him for the rest of his life. Today, the attempted assassination remains one of the most astonishing moments in American political history. A reminder that sometimes determination can be just as extraordinary as history itself. Our next story takes us to Berlin, Germany, during the final days of the Second World War in April 1945. Imagine descending into a reinforced underground bunker deep beneath the streets of the city. Above, artillery echoes in the distance. Buildings shake with every explosion. The once powerful German capital is slowly being surrounded. Inside the bunker, however, life continues in an uneasy silence. Messengers come and go. Military officers study maps. And meals are still served at the usual times. Adolf Hitler had followed a largely vegetarian diet during the later years of his life. On the afternoon of April 30th, 1945, witnesses reported that his final meal was a simple serving of pasta with tomato sauce. There was no grand banquet, no elaborate celebration, just an ordinary meal served in extraordinary circumstances. Shortly afterward, Hitler met privately with several members of his staff. He thanked them for their loyalty and quietly said his farewells. Later that afternoon, he and his wife, Eva Braun, retreated to a private room inside the bunker. A short time later, both were dead. Following Hitler's earlier instructions, their bodies were carried outside into the garden of the Reich Chancellery, where they were covered with gasoline and burned to prevent them from being displayed by advancing Soviet forces. Within days, Berlin surrendered. Soon afterward, Germany's unconditional surrender brought the war in Europe to an end. Today, Hitler's final meal is remembered not because of what was served, but because it marked the final ordinary moment before one of history's most significant chapters came to a close. It is a quiet reminder that even history's most consequential events are often preceded by moments that appear remarkably ordinary. Our next story takes us to Japan during the closing days of the Second World War in August of 1945. Imagine finishing a long day of work in the city of Hiroshima. The morning sky is clear. People are heading to work. Streetcars move quietly through the city. Everything seems perfectly ordinary. Among the workers preparing to return home is an engineer named Tsutomu Yamaguchi. He had traveled to Hiroshima on a business trip and was preparing to leave the city the following day. Then, at 8:15 on the morning of August 6th, history changed forever. A blinding flash lit up the sky. Moments later, the world's first wartime atomic bomb exploded over the city. Yamaguchi survived the blast, though he suffered serious burns and other injuries. Despite what had happened, he managed to find transportation and began the difficult journey back to his hometown. That hometown was Nagasaki. Just 3 days later, while reporting what he had witnessed to his supervisor, another brilliant flash suddenly filled the sky. A second atomic bomb exploded over the city. Remarkably, Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived once again. He became the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as having survived both atomic bombings. In the years that followed, Yamaguchi dedicated much of his life to speaking about the devastating human cost of nuclear weapons. He lived until 2010, sharing his experiences in the hope that future generations would never witness such destruction again. Today, his story remains one of history's most extraordinary tales of survival, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest moments, the strength to endure can sometimes seem almost impossible to believe. Our next story takes us to Europe during the height of the great witch hunts between the 15th and 17th centuries. Imagine living in a small village where nearly everyone knows one another. The seasons determine whether families have enough food to survive. A failed harvest can bring hunger. A sudden illness can claim an entire household. Without modern medicine or scientific explanations, many people searched for answers wherever they could find them. Sometimes those answers came in the form of witchcraft. Across much of Europe, a growing belief took hold that certain individuals had made pacts with the devil, granting them the power to cause disease, destroy crops, poison livestock, and bring misfortune upon entire communities. Fear spread from village to village, fueled by rumors, religious conflict, and uncertainty. Contrary to what many people believe, the largest witch hunts did not occur during the Middle Ages. Most took place much later, between the late 15th century and the 17th century, during a period of tremendous political and religious upheaval across Europe. As accusations increased, neighbors began turning against neighbors. A personal dispute, an unexpected tragedy, or even a failed harvest could sometimes be enough to place someone under suspicion. Once accused, proving innocence was often extremely difficult. Trials varied from region to region. Some courts required evidence and testimony, while others relied heavily on confessions that had been extracted under torture. Fear often spread faster than reason, creating waves of accusations that could engulf entire communities. Historians estimate that between 40,000 and 60,000 people were executed for witchcraft across Europe. Although men were also accused, roughly 3/4 of those executed were women. Over time, attitudes slowly began to change. Judges became increasingly skeptical of unreliable testimony. Scholars questioned long-held beliefs about witchcraft, and advances in science offered natural explanations for many events that had once been blamed on supernatural forces. Gradually, the great European witch hunts came to an end. Today, they remain one of history's most sobering examples of how fear, misinformation, and suspicion can influence entire societies. A quiet reminder that extraordinary claims, when accepted without evidence, can sometimes have extraordinary consequences. Our next story takes us to the small village of Salem, Massachusetts, in the spring of 1692. Imagine waking in a quiet colonial settlement surrounded by dense forests. Wooden homes line muddy streets. Church bells mark the passing of each day, and nearly every aspect of life revolves around faith and the close-knit community. It is a place where everyone knows one another, and where rumors can spread almost as quickly as the wind. Then, without warning, several young girls begin behaving in ways no one can explain. They scream without reason, fall to the ground in violent fits, and claim they are being tormented by invisible forces. Ministers and local officials search for answers, but with no clear medical explanation available, many conclude that witchcraft must be responsible. Before long, accusations begin. At first, only a handful of people are suspected, but fear quickly grows. Friends accuse friends. Neighbors testify against neighbors. Even respected members of the community find themselves under suspicion. The courts accepted a controversial form of testimony known as spectral evidence, in which witnesses claimed that a person's spirit had appeared to them in dreams or visions. Although impossible to verify, these claims were often treated as credible evidence during the trials. Over the course of the next several months, more than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft. 19 were convicted and executed by hanging. One man died after refusing to enter a plea. Several others died while awaiting trial in prison. Eventually, doubts about the proceedings began to grow. Religious leaders questioned the use of spectral evidence, and colonial officials became increasingly concerned that innocent people were being condemned. By early 1693, the trials were brought to an end. In the years that followed, many of those involved publicly admitted the trials had been a terrible mistake. Some jurors apologized for their decisions, and the colony later offered compensation to several of the victims' families. Today, the Salem witch trials remain one of the most famous episodes of mass hysteria in American history. A quiet reminder that fear, when allowed to replace evidence, can lead ordinary communities to make extraordinary mistakes. Our next story takes us back to Salem, Massachusetts, during the autumn of 1692. Imagine being an elderly farmer after a lifetime of hard work. Your fields have been tended for decades, your family has grown, and your land represents everything you've spent a lifetime building. At 81 years old, you hope to live out your remaining years in peace. Instead, your name appears among those accused of witchcraft. Giles Curie was a respected landowner in Salem when the witch trials reached their height. Like many others, he found himself caught in a growing wave of fear and suspicion. Accusers claimed he had practiced witchcraft, despite there being no physical evidence to support the allegations. When Curie was brought before the court, he made an extraordinary decision. Rather than pleading guilty or innocent, he refused to enter any plea at all. Under English law at the time, a trial could not proceed unless the accused entered a plea. To force one, authorities turned to an ancient legal punishment known as peine forte et dure, or strong and hard punishment. Curie was laid on the ground, and a wooden board was placed across his chest. One by one, heavy stones were added. The weight increased hour after hour as officials repeatedly demanded that he enter a plea. According to tradition, Curie refused every request. Instead, he answered with just 2 words: more weight. After 2 days of relentless pressure, Giles Curie died without ever entering a plea. Historians believe his decision may have been deliberate. Had he been convicted of witchcraft, his property could have been confiscated by the colonial government. By refusing to plead, Curie prevented a conviction, allowing his land to remain with his family instead. His death shocked many people, even at the time. Only a few days later, several more executions took place, but growing public unease continued to build. Within weeks, support for the trials began to collapse, helping bring the Salem witch trials to an end. Today, Giles Curie is remembered as one of the most remarkable figures of the Salem witch trials. His final act became a symbol of courage, determination, and resistance in the face of overwhelming injustice. A quiet reminder that even when everything else is taken away, a person can still choose how they face history. Imagine a nation filled with excitement as the FIFA World Cup begins. Across Colombia, streets are decorated with flags, televisions fill with eager fans, and millions believe their national team has a genuine chance to compete for the championship. After years of impressive performances, expectations have never been higher. Among the team's most respected players is defender Andrés Escobar. Known for his calm demeanor, sportsmanship, and leadership, Escobar had earned admirations both on and off the field. Teammates and fans alike viewed him as one of Colombia's brightest stars. Then came a match against the United States. Early in the game, an American cross was played into Colombia's penalty area. Escobar stretched to intercept the ball, hoping to clear the danger. Instead, it deflected into his own net. The own goal gave the United States an early lead. Colombia eventually lost the match and was eliminated from the tournament, ending what many had hoped would be a historic World Cup run. For most athletes, an unfortunate mistake is simply part of competition. But in Colombia during the 1990s, the situation was far more complicated. The country was struggling with violence, fueled by powerful drug cartels and organized crime. Enormous sums of money had been wagered on football matches, and emotions surrounding the World Cup ran dangerously high. Just days after returning home, Escobar visited friends at a local restaurant in Medellin. As he left the restaurant during the early hours of July 2, 1994, he became involved in an argument in the parking lot. The confrontation turned deadly. Andrés Escobar was shot and killed at just 27 years old. His death shocked the sporting world. More than 100,000 people attended his funeral, while millions more mourned across Colombia and around the world. For many, his tragic death became a symbol of the devastating consequences of allowing violence and hatred to overshadow sport. Today, Andrés Escobar is remembered not for a single own goal, but for his integrity, humility, and sportsmanship. A quiet reminder that behind every athlete is a human being, and that some moments in history are remembered not for the game itself, but for the lessons they leave behind. Our next story takes us to the state of Illinois on the evening of May 9th, 1994. Imagine standing outside a prison as the sun slowly disappears below the horizon. Reporters gather behind barricades, television cameras point toward the prison gates, and people wait quietly for news. Inside, one of America's most notorious serial killers is spending the final hours of his life. As the evening unfolds, prison staff prepare one final meal. Many people assume that those facing execution request extravagant feasts or unusual delicacies. In reality, the meals are often surprisingly ordinary. John Wayne Gacy requested a meal that reflected his past employment as the manager of several Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. His final meal reportedly included a bucket of original recipe fried chicken, French fries, fresh strawberries, and a dozen fried shrimp. It was a simple order. Nothing about the meal hinted at the crimes that had made his name infamous. During the 1970s, Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys, burying many of his victims beneath his suburban home near Chicago. His crimes shocked the nation and remain among the most notorious serial murder cases in American history. Shortly after midnight on May 10, 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection. His execution marked the end of a case that had haunted investigators and the families of victims for nearly 2 decades. Stories about the final meals of condemned prisoners often capture public attention because they offer one last glimpse into an individual's final hours. Yet historians and criminologists frequently note that the meal itself is rarely the most important part of the story. Instead, it is the lives of the victims that deserve to be remembered. Today, John Wayne Gacy's final meal is remembered not because of what was served, but because it marked the closing chapter of one of America's darkest criminal cases, a quiet reminder that history is measured not by the final meal someone eats, but by the lives they leave behind. Our next story takes us to Florida on the evening of January 23rd, 1989. Imagine standing outside a prison long after the sun has set. Television crews line the roads leading to the entrance. Reporters speak quietly into their microphones while small groups of protesters and onlookers wait behind barricades. Inside, one of America's most infamous serial killers is spending his final hours. As midnight approaches, prison staff offer him one final meal. Ted Bundy declined to make a special request. Following prison policy, he was served the standard meal provided to inmates. It consisted of steak, eggs, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk, coffee, and juice. According to prison officials, Bundy ate very little of it. Over the previous decade, Bundy had confessed to murdering numerous young women across several states, though investigators believe the true number of victims may never be known. His crimes shocked the United States and made him one of the country's most notorious serial killers. Shortly before dawn on January 24th, Bundy was escorted to Florida's execution chamber. Outside the prison, hundreds of people had gathered throughout the night. Some held signs honoring the victims, while others waited simply to witness the conclusion of a case that had dominated headlines for years. Just after sunrise, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair. His death marked the end of one of the largest and most widely followed criminal investigations in American history. Today, Ted Bundy's last meal is remembered not because of what was served, but because it marked the final chapter of a case that forever changed countless lives. A quiet reminder that history is best measured not by the final moments of those who cause suffering, but by remembering the innocent people whose lives were taken far too soon. And so, our journey through 20 dark stories from history comes to an end. Tonight, we've wandered through tragedy, mystery, persecution, disaster, and some of the darker moments hidden within the past. Each story is a reminder that history contains countless lives and events that have faded quietly into time. But those stories can wait for another night. For now, let the past slowly disappear into the distance. Thank you for spending this journey with me. Until next time, sleep well.